Marty actually said he wasn't feeling that well, that was actually the six patriarchs' excuse for not going to the palace, which he's been going over. So I thought Marty really was a practiced six patriarchs method very literally and got me to come. But I'm actually very happy to be able to investigate the Six Patriarch Sutra because it's a very, you could say, very insightful text that, for me, is actually always a little bit uncomfortable to read because I always identify with the other person in my own process of thinking and practice, and then the Sixth Patriarch comes back with some way of looking at things, or almost like, say, breaking that place of attachment that I actually feel very deeply in my own process. I think, but just as a kind of a spirit, I know Mara didn't usually start with this, but for kind of a traditional lecture, especially as kind of a monastic, we usually begin with just kind of paying homage to the Buddha. It's a sense of kind of bringing in a presence of kind of, you could say, an awakened presence into our minds, you could say, as kind of aspiration for awakening. And then afterwards we recite a short verse, which is actually composed by the Empress, Wu Zetian, who we'll talk about tonight, about paying respect to the Dharma, a kind of a heart of respect for the Dharma. So I was wondering if you could just follow after me. I'll recite a line, and then you can just repeat back. I first do one in Pali, and then I'll do it in English, and I'll do it kind of a hybrid Sanskrit-Chinese. So it's not too difficult. If you come for any of our sutra lectures here, you'd hear us doing this chant. Okay? So if you're welcome to put your palms together if you wish, or not, it's okay. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one.
Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one.
Namo sadanto sucedoye alahadi samya samputoche.
Namo sadanto sucedoye alahadi samya samputoche.
Can you repeat after me? Supreme and wondrous Dharma.
Supreme and wondrous Dharma.
Subtle and profound.
Subtle and profound.
Rarely is encountered.
Rarely is encountered.
Even in a billion eons.
Even in a billion eons.
But now we see and hear it.
But now we see and hear it.
And accept it reverently.
And accept it reverently.
May we truly understand.
May we truly understand
the Buddha's actual meaning.
the Buddha's actual meaning.
Okay. All Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, say Venerable Master, and all good and wise friends, good evening to tonight's, you could say, I don't know if to call it Dharma teachings, but some reflections on the Sixth Patriarch Sutra. As I mentioned in the beginning, I'm not Marty. If you haven't seen me before in the monastery, my name is Chuan, one of the resident monks here. And you could say I'm, like you, just trying to cultivate the way it makes sense of my mind. And so I happen to be sitting here right now. But I think if anybody has things you would like to contribute when we read the text, please do. This is a sense very much in the Sixth Patriarch spirit. It's we all have our, you could say, our inherent wisdom, and the spirit isn't that it's somehow located here. It's actually, and actually we'll see that tonight when the Sixth Patriarch is responding back to the Chamberlain who's asking him questions. That he's not so easy, or you could say he doesn't fall into the trap of somehow putting the authority and wisdom in front and not moving it back into the Chamberlain who's asking the question. And so tonight we're actually going over chapter 10. Chapter 10? Chapter 9. Chapter 9, yes. Chapter 9, Imperial Summons, on page 99. And I was told where Marty got to page 100, where Xue Jian, Chamberlain Xue Jian, asks his second question. Asks his second question. So just to give some context, the sixth patriarch is now, you could say, a much more established teacher, right? He first got to the monastery as a kind of a young man, and then received the robe and bowl from the fifth patriarch, and has spent a long time in hiding, right? And then he came out at one point and started teaching and established a monastery down south. And over time, he's now actually attracted a large following, built an established monastery, and a respected teacher throughout China. So much so that actually the empress, Wu Zetian, and the emperor, here it says Zhong, have an imperial summons for him. It'd be like maybe our White House were to send a notice out saying, you're a great teacher, please come into the White House. We need advisors on spiritual matters. Please, give us some advice. And so you can imagine if that happened in America. I don't know, but I guess in China that happened. They would want to learn Chuan Buddhism. And so they invited Dharma Master Shen Shou, who was in the north. And he turned down the request and saying, actually, the person with real wisdom is in the south, the sixth patriarch. And so this chamberlain, is there the chamberlain Xue Jian? I don't know if I got my tones right. Is that the tones? Xue Jian. Xue Jian came and to the sixth patriarch asking about the Dharma. So what was the sixth patriarch's response to the request? He declined on grounds of illness, right on page 99. That's kind of joking in the beginning. Marty mentioned he was kind of feeling ill, so Marty declined to come tonight on grounds of illness. And I think I was talking a little bit about illness tonight too, because actually it's a theme that comes up in this whole section quite a bit, and in Buddhism it's an important topic. And then Xue Juan this is his opportunity to be with the sixth patriarch. So he asked a couple questions. So his first question is talking about Chuan practice, Chuan meditation. And he asked about, well, people talk about you have to, sit and practice Chuan to be able to, really wake up. So it says, without Chuan concentration, liberation is impossible. He says, what is your teaching? And the sixth patriarch, as Marty explained last week, kind of cuts away at this sense of attaching to Chuan practice in a kind of rigid way. Kind of saying, he says here actually, if you think that it's just sitting around is becoming enlightened, that's actually not real Chuan. Okay? If you claim that the Tathagata either sits or lies down, you're traveling a wrong path. Why? Because he neither comes from anywhere nor goes anywhere. Freedom from birth and death is the Tathagata's pure Chuan meditation. The still emptiness of all things is the Tathagata's pure Chuan sitting. Ultimately, there is no realization, how much the less sitting. So he breaks this duality that you kind of wake up through kind of this sitting, through the form of sitting, but he actually points to the actual mind of the Buddha for the chamberlain. And so it kind of, pokes at the chamberlain. The second question, which I've kind of been reflecting on, is Xue Juan has a kind of a comeback question. And so we can maybe read it. So I'll just read I think Marty just reads it himself, right? So I'll just read the section. And you can just imagine. So the scene is essentially you have a court chamberlain coming to the monastery of the sixth patriarch. Probably there's a lot of people in attendance, right? This is very public. He's probably a very public figure. He's been, in the court. And the sixth patriarch is sitting there receiving this person. And so he's already got a kind of a back and forth. Now the chamberlain's asking a second question. So how does he begin? So he says, when I return to the palace, their majesties will surely question me, right? He's going to be asked some questions when he gets back to the palace. So he says, please, master, be so kind as to instruct me on the essentials of the mind, so that I can pass it along to the two rulers and students of the way in the capital. It'll be like one lamp, lighting 100,000 lamps. Light upon light, without end, illuminating the darkness. Oh, this guy's eloquent. He got eloquent, right? Oh, you'll be like, you're the lamp, and you just light up one lamp, and I'll be able to pass on the Dharma to this emperor, and I'll just go on, and it'll be filling the whole country. Won't that be wonderful, right? This is kind of, the Chamberlain's an eloquent, probably well-versed in the court to speak in, you could say, high praise of who he's talking to. So one of the things I get a sense of here is there's a little bit of this kind of, you could say, flattery, this kind of underlying flattery that's in there, right? Oh, you've got the wisdom. Please share it with me, right? Somebody coming to you say, oh, you're so wise, you're so compassionate, oh wow, I really admire you. Could you please, help me out, right? It's this kind of, I'm in my mind when that energy starts, I actually kind of have a red alert. My mind goes to red alert, beep, 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 beep. I go, uh-oh, something's going to happen. I better be really careful with my mind. Not so much what the other person, but more what my mind actually does, right? So, okay, then the sixth patriarch's response is this. He says, the master said, the way is beyond light or dark. Light and darkness are complementary ideas. They are relative terms, so even endless light must have an end. Therefore, the Vilamakirti Sutra says, the Dharma has no comparison because there's nothing relative in it. Shrijin continues, he says, light symbolizes wisdom. Darkness symbolizes the afflictions. If cultivators of the way do not use wisdom to expose and untangle the afflictions, how can they liberate themselves from beginnings, births, and deaths? The master said, the afflictions themselves are bodhi. They are non-dual, correlated. Someone who uses wisdom to expose and eliminate the afflictions has the understanding of the two vehicles, a teaching suitable for the sheep and deer carts. Those of the highest wisdom are not like this at all. Shrijin asked, what is the great vehicle view and understanding? The master said, ordinary people see light and darkness as two different things, but the wise realize they are essentially non-dual. Our real nature is non-dual. It is not diminished in ordinary people, nor is it greater in worthy sages. It is not disturbed amid the afflictions, nor is stilled and static while in Chuan concentration. It does not end, nor endure forever. It does not arrive or leave. It has no location, neither inside nor outside, nor in the middle. Unborn, undying, its essence and appearance is just so as it really is. It is permanent and unchanging. It is called the way. So, I kind of was reflecting on this. So what would be the response if somebody came and asked the question, okay, please, share your wisdom with me. He asked the first question. Now, the second question he asked, please, you're like a light, and please illuminate me, and I can pass it on to other people. What would be the response? If somebody came to yourself and asked that question, or somebody came to me and asked that question, what would be our response? And that's kind of, I think, a valuable reflection as we look at these sutras, is to kind of put ourselves, you can either play the Chamberlain role, which I usually find myself in the Chamberlain role, or you can play yourself in the sixth patriarch role and try to respond to the question. How would we respond? We say, yes, okay, let me teach you some wisdom. Right, that's one approach. Or, if it was a flattery and you can kind of, I think in Chinese culture, go, oh, no, I have no wisdom. It'd be kind of a dismissing of praise to kind of get out of the limelight. And so, what will be our response to a situation like this? And I think it's interesting that the sixth patriarch here takes the analogy, the beautiful analogy that the Chamberlain gave, and essentially what do you call it? Not undercuts it. He kind of what would you call the word? It would be, he kind of, not, it's not even deconstructing. It's kind of just like he punctures it. So he says the way is beyond light or dark. Okay, so all of a sudden, this duality that Chamberlain Xuejin set up, this, you're light and dark, is kind of like, wait a moment, on this path, there is no light and there is no dark. So you're actually playing the wrong game. You're in the wrong game. Light and darkness are complementary ideas, right? Where there's light, then there's darkness. Right? Before I talk about the flattery or praise, let's say, where there's praise, there's blame. Where there's greatness, there's smallness. We can probably go through in our entire experience and think through ways that we identify with words, either in the positive or the negative, and see how they're all complementary. You have one, and then you have the other. I'll give you maybe an example that I've been kind of. So one of the roles I have, I also kind of work in Dharma Realm Buddhist University as the chaplain and help in residential life. And recently, I've been really looking at this system of communication called nonviolent communications, and it's called a compassionate communication. And so there's an interesting thing that he actually makes a point, which I thought was I actually never thought about that way. That he actually said, when people praise someone else, it can actually be pretty violent. I said, what? How does that work? Why would a praise be violent? Right? So his interesting analysis, he said, because when you praise someone, say you're really smart, you're now labeling a person, and you're setting up yourself as the actual judge to determine what is smart and what is stupid. I was like, oh, that's an interesting. I never really thought about it that way. All of a sudden, by my saying something to praise somebody else, I'm actually setting up a duality of an experience that can potentially trap the person in the sense that now they think, oh, I'm smart, so I have to constantly live up to that expectation of being smart for whatever I was praised for. And it creates people who are maybe watching that going, oh, wow, maybe I'm stupid. And it sets myself up, the person who's making the comment, as an actual judge to be able to determine what is really smart or stupid. Right? It's interesting. I've actually never thought about that in that way before. It's maybe a more worldly example, but the sixth patriarch, I think, is pointing actually at a deeper place, that actually fundamentally these terms are actually just relative terms that are not contained in the way, not contained in the Tao, not contained in this path to awakening. Those dualities are just set up by the conditioned mind. And we're working with it all the time. So we had to, I think, in some sense, we have to have skillful ways of working with those conditioned realms, but to not get stuck in them. Not get stuck in them. And actually, the other point he made, which I thought was a really good point too, was that he was saying that our experience is always dynamic. This was the nonviolent communication. The author was Marshall Rosenberg. Said our experience is always dynamic, but our language tricks us because of words like is. Like he is stupid or he is smart, just using that example. And what happens is that it actually essentializes a person in a particular way. And so you think of myself, I am smart or I am stupid, it essentializes in a particular way that is actually no longer in a dynamic flow of reality. He says, but our language tricks us because we can use words like that basically allow things to be fixed. I thought, well, that's actually a really interesting thought too. I've never really thought about that. But you can see in the conditioned realm with language, there's a lot of tricks that our language does to us that we get tripped up in. And this is a kind of a very insightful man, but he's not coming up with a six-pager. He's not looking for a way to transcend birth and death, or not even transcend birth and death. You can see the sixth patriarch is he's able to let go of even the sense of having to transcend, right? But you can get a sense that we are definitely in a conditioned realm. The words and language, they actually trap us in different ways if we don't know how to use it skillfully. Okay, so then he continues, says, they are relative terms. So even endless night or even endless light must have an end. Endless light must have an end. So he's saying, wow, your light is probably 无量光. I don't know what it's the Chinese they used, but you're just infinite light, just endless and no end to it. And he says, well, whatever there's light, there's going to come an end. So your way of talking and thinking is there's an endless and there's an end. There's that sets up another duality. So he's actually coming at it, just breaking the dualities of the language that he's using, the ways he's set up his mind. And my sense is he's set up his mind in a particular way where he's using it. This would be my own reading, interpretation of the text, and you can think about it for yourself. But a kind of, because I can see it in my own process if I was the Chamberlain, and I can see it actually still happening to me all the time, is you're with somebody who's highly revered, and so maybe I'm a little bit insecure, and so how do I, kind of like, okay, how do I do this? I kind of praise the person hoping to kind of, get some praise back. Because usually with experience, if somebody praises us, you go, oh, wow, that person must be really knowledgeable because, he recognized how great I am. Therefore, and then there's a kind of back and forth of praise. And we usually play this game all the time. So this is a kind of, I'm sure, we go, okay, the sixth patriarch doesn't play that game. What are you talking about? There's no light and darkness. There's no endless light. There's no endless and end. You're setting all this stuff up. So then he gives a quote from the Vilamakirti Sutra, which says, the Dharma has no comparison because there's nothing relative in it. So the sixth patriarch kind of just gives a Dharma nugget and says, okay, so if you look at the text, what do they teach? They actually say that the Dharma is beyond these relativities. There's nothing relative in it.
Isn't there also another subtext going on here that the Chamberlain's basically saying, like, help me out. Like, if I go back empty-handed, I'm going to take a beating. It's going to be bad for me.
Yeah,
right?
good.
At least that's what it seems like you're sort of suggesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be good for him.
Not going to be good for him, probably.
So, what's the thinking? What's your thinking behind the fact that the sixth patriarch is kind of, shining him on? It's like, yeah, that's kind of your tough luck. I'm not going to give you. He's not so far giving him anything practical, tangible that he can return with to save his own rear end. So,
yeah. Like,
how is that a good thing?
How is that a good thing? Okay, so maybe I'll rephrase the question and ask the group and see if people have any thoughts. So what I hear is a sense that the Chamberlain is actually kind of hasn't completed his mission, right? He's come to invite the sixth patriarch, and the sixth patriarch actually denied the request on illness.
Right.
And now he has to go back, and it's like, okay, I better have something to go back with. And the sixth patriarch is not giving him anything like concrete to like bring back that he can say, okay, here, I didn't fulfill the mission, but at least I brought this back for you. And your question is, how is that skillful, the sixth patriarch?
I guess it's, how is that a moral thing?
How's it a moral thing to do?
Well, we're not to the end of the chapter yet.
Yeah, right.
Not end of chapter yet. True.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. We can jump to the end because we'll see what Chamberlain Shujin felt he got to be able to bring back.
Okay.
That'll be interesting.
I don't feel the need for us to do that.
Okay.
If you think it's
okay.
a good thing, then that's fine.
Or does anyone have any particular thoughts about that?
I was thinking the very same thing. He must feel pretty uncomfortable.
Yeah, he must feel pretty uncomfortable.
Because his head's pretty much on.
His head's on the line. Yeah. So it's a, and the sixth patriarch is not giving him any slack.
Yeah.
No slack. Okay, I'm asking all my questions are the wrong question. What do I do here? Right? Okay, well, if we look at the next line, Shujin here is, still responding back. I think he's probably trying to get some traction, right? Just gonna get some traction. Okay, I go ahead. I try to ask some smart questions. The sixth patriarch cut those down, and I try to praise him, and then he cut that down, and now okay, what do I do? Okay, wait a moment, what you said doesn't make any sense based on the stuff I understand. So he says here, light symbolizes wisdom, right? We look at the images, we have the Buddha's light, we have, the Amitabha and the Buddha in the back, and his name actually literally means limitless light, right? So he says, light symbolizes wisdom. Darkness symbolizes the afflictions. If cultivators of the way do not use wisdom to expose and untangle the afflictions, how can they liberate themselves from beginningless births and deaths? Good question. Right, okay, good comeback, right? Oh, wait a moment, you're saying there's no light and darkness? But wait a moment, I thought the whole practice was about, using our light of our wisdom to kind of, you could say, break through the entanglement of our afflictions. Isn't that the whole process? If we don't do that, how can we get free? Right, that's his understanding of the Dharma.
I kind of agree with him too. He's saying, like, look, I'm talking in symbols here. Light symbolizes wisdom.
Yeah.
Don't, it's semantic with me. It's say like, well, it's not really light or darkness, it's all relative, how's that going to help?
Yeah. Okay, so it's good. So we can get the sense of the existential question that's being asked, right? We're getting in the text. So you can see Shujin is trying to come back, and what does the master say? The master says, the afflictions themselves are Bodhi. Well, if we've been listening to the Sixth Patriarch lectures, that line has come up before, right? Afflictions are Bodhi. The afflictions themselves are Bodhi. They are non-dual, correlated. Someone who uses wisdom to expose and eliminate the afflictions has the understanding of the two vehicles, a teaching suitable for the sheep and deer carts. Those of the highest wisdom are not like this at all. The afflictions themselves are Bodhi. The thing that catches me with that particular line is that there's a tendency, and I see it kind of really strongly myself, there's a sense of the afflictions are bad and Bodhi is good, and I want to get rid of the afflictions, I want to get Bodhi. And in that process, what the experience is often I'm kind of pushing one side away and trying to go towards the other side. And I think of people who've been practicing a bit, in the beginning it's deceptive. My experience in the beginning is deceptive because it seems like it's working to kind of push one side away and then kind of go for the Bodhi, go for kind of a peacefulness. But what is actually kind of happening is a kind of an avoidance of all the things that we don't want to deal with. And they actually have a whole psychological term for it. Now they call it spiritual bypassing. I don't know if people heard the term. Have people heard the term? No? It's actually a pretty important, it's so important they actually had a monastic conference where they had a psychologist come and actually explain this term. Because what happens, particularly for Zen practitioners, is that Zen practitioners come to meditation as a way to get awakened, to get enlightened. And they think enlightenment is some kind of super peaceful state that's empty of everything and I'm just kind of free and easy and happy and no problems. So I'm here to meditate, to let go of everything. I'm just going to, and in that process, any afflictions that arise or problems that arise, they just kind of push it away. I'm just trying to get peaceful. I'm just getting peaceful and peaceful and getting peaceful and peaceful. And what they found was actually 10, 20 years later of practice, all this stuff would come back. If you look at the Buddhist Zen world, you can just type this term up in your Google search and see it. And these issues would come up and resurface, and people are like, wait a minute, I've been practicing for so long, how can I still have all these problems? What's going on? It's because in the process of spiritual practice, we actually haven't been dealing with the afflictions. We've just been avoiding them. And this is a very, you could say, a very easy trap to fall into as we kind of start. I definitely, in that process starting out, was very much in that mind because I think the natural tendency coming from kind of, at least I grew up in America, there's kind of a consumeristic productivity, getting stuff mentality. And so that mentality just kind of gets put into the spiritual practice, and the problem is that that framework for coming at spiritual practice doesn't work. It's not about, kind of seeking after bodhi and just kind of avoiding all the afflictions or getting rid of them in a way that doesn't really deal with them. And so that's one level I think this comes at, is for us to actually see, actually the afflictions are not something we're trying to push away and run away from. Actually, they themselves are the stuff of bodhi. The sixth picture actually gives a very beautiful analogy, and he has a commentary on the Vajra Sutra. I don't think I can remember it perfectly, but he was talking about cultivation and spiritual practice, and it's mining this mountain. And the ore that we get from spiritual practice, from mining this mountain, are the afflictions. And then we smelt those afflictions to get to bodhi. And I was like, wow, so the actual fruits of real spiritual practice is actually being able to actually see the affliction. And then you have to smelt that to get to bodhi. So like, okay, so the afflictions aren't something we were trying to avoid. I think that's one place to start. But I think actually in this teaching, the sixth picture is actually going another level deeper. Another level deeper, because if you look at because he actually talks about the two vehicles, which I'm guessing people probably have been exploring. People know what the two vehicles are? Two vehicles? No? No, two vehicles? She's shaking heads. Anybody? Two vehicles? Yuan?
Well, in Chinese, two vehicle is a great vehicle and a small vehicle, literally from Chinese word 大唱, 小唱. But 大唱actually means Mahayana practice, and the small vehicle means
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I think that's definitely one way they often talk about it in terms of the 大乘小乘, the kind of great vehicle, and you can sometimes say the small vehicle. I think in this case, though, when he's referring to two vehicles, he's describing the two vehicles of the, you could say the small vehicle, if you look in this text. The Lotus Sutra, because it talks about the sheep and deer carts. So the two vehicles here are the path of the Arhat and the path of the Parcheka Buddha. The Arhat path is the path cultivating the Four Noble Truths. Four Noble Truths, people, that it begins with that there's this kind of recognition of suffering, and that the cause of suffering comes from a craving or this thirst, or this, you kind of sometimes use the word desire. And then the third one is that suffering can end. So it's actually very positive, you could say, that suffering can end. And then the fourth one, the way out of suffering, is cultivating the Eightfold Noble Path, the Noble Eightfold Path. That's the Four Noble Truths. And that's the teaching, the classic teaching for the Arhat. And for me, actually, the key insight there that's really useful for modern times is seeing that real freedom doesn't come from doing whatever we want. Because usually how we interpret freedom in our experience is being able to do whatever we want. Okay, well, I want to do this, I can do it. I feel really free because I have all this ability to control what's going on. The freedom that the Four Noble Truths is pointing to actually is a freedom from the wanting itself, freedom from the craving itself. So it's a much more, it's actually a much more attainable freedom, if you really look at it, because the freedom of always getting what we want is almost impossible, because sadly there's other people in the world and they're all doing the same thing in what we now call a capitalistic system, where everyone's just trying to get what we want. And then sometimes those wants do not actually match, and then we do something called fighting with one another. And there's a lot of suffering there too. So in that insight is also realizing, actually, I can actually be free of my wants. And if I'm free of my wants, I actually get free of suffering. So that's actually a very interesting insight. And the Arhat path actually embodies that to its fruition. And the Parcheka Buddha path, which I won't go into as much detail, is actually, Parcheka literally means kind of, I think, solitary, and Buddha is a Buddha awakened one. So they're solitary awakened ones, solitary sages, that they actually practice a teaching called dependent origination. They observe the arisal of ignorance and how that goes through this 12 links to cause all the way to the end of old age, sickness, and death, and they said, and the whole massive suffering. So this is another very profound teaching that they would describe these Pratyeka Buddhas going out into nature and just observing the patterns of nature. And by observing very deeply the patterns of nature and how things work, they wake up. They become free of the cycle of birth and death. So the Buddha also taught this method called dependent origination. So you can look that up if you want as a teaching. So these are the two vehicles, which are very profound teachings unto themselves. But in these systems, there's a sense that I'm getting rid of suffering. I'm getting rid of craving, greed, hatred, and delusion, and I'm realizing nirvana. And in the Pratyeka Buddha, I'm getting rid of ignorance. There's still this sense that you're still kind of attaining awakening. And so here the Buddha is actually, the sixth patriarch is saying, actually that way of coming at it still has a duality built in. There's still a duality built in. That's not the highest wisdom. It says the highest wisdom are not like this at all. And so here he's referencing the Lotus Sutra, which I'm not sure if people have studied at all, but there's a very that sutra has many parables in it, and one parable is it has a father who has a lot of kids in a house. You can imagine the monastery. You can say we're all here in this house. Okay, imagine the house, and like the house is on fire. So it's a wood building, so it's all on fire. But the kids in the house are too busy with their toys. Probably with our digital devices. Everybody's got their smartphone. They can play whatever game they want now on it. Ooh, we're playing all these games. And so the father who's outside sees all the kids inside and the house is burning and says, "Come out, come out. The house is on fire." And she just goes, "These kids have no idea what's even fire. Like, what's fire? What come out?" So they're just like, well, no, we're just playing around games. What? We're very happy here. I don't need to do anything. So then this father looks at his children and he says, "Oh my goodness, I can maybe go in and grab like one or two of them. There's like maybe 20 or some in the house. I can't save them all. What can I do?" He says, "Well, I've got a skillful means. I've got a way to do this." And he says, "Okay, kids, I have your favorite toys outside. In this one they say, I have a sheep cart, I have a deer cart, I have an ox cart. Now it'll probably be something like I've got a BMW, I've got a Mercedes, I got some, I don't know what's that really, Tesla, I don't know. I'm definitely out of, having been a monk for a while, I don't know what the latest, maybe like an iPhone 10, I don't know, what else do people want? They have all this stuff out there that, kids want. And so the kids get really excited, and it says in the sutras that they scramble out the door fighting with one another to get out the door to get their toys. They get outside the house, and the moment they get outside the house collapses. And the father says he takes a big sigh for this. "Oh, I got my kids out." And kids still are completely unaware of the house. They're like, "Where's the toys?" And in this Lotus Sutra, the Buddha says, "I got you all the best gift of all." He says, "I give you a great white ox cart. This ox cart has got, bells and tassels, and it's got this huge ox, that's really strong, and the cart is really splendid." And he just describes this, and the kids see it and they're just overjoyed. Like, wow, this is more than I even expected. This is like, talk about, you promise like an iPhone 10, you go out, it's like an iPhone 100. It's not even something you could even imagine in our minds. It's like, whoa, it's like a virtual reality phone that, do anything you want with it. So it's like, whoa, they're really excited. And so, and the spirit of the text is saying the Buddha used some skillful means to get themselves out the door. But what he actually wanted them was to realize the highest awakening. But actually the sixth patriarch in this particular text responds to one of these monks who actually recite the Lotus Sutra all the time. If you were to just look at it, page 72, you can kind of look at it. He taught a monk who actually named Bhikshu Phada, who just recited the Lotus Sutra all the time, day in, day out. But the problem was that when he recited the sutra, he got really prideful, thinking that, I'm a really great practitioner because I recited the sutra like 3,000 times. Okay, so he got that into his mind. So when he actually met the sixth patriarch, and he bowed to the sixth patriarch, he didn't even bow all the way down. You know, he's probably like, oh yeah, yeah, okay. And so he's like, wow. You know, you bowing is a way to let down your ego and your pride, but somehow, you know, you don't even bow all the way. Something must be on your mind. And so he talks, well, you know, I've recited Lotus Sutra 3,000 times, you know, I'm a really great practitioner. And so in this exchange, the sixth patriarch teaches him actually, well, the Dharma was turning you. You were basically taking the Dharma and feeding your ego with it. You know, that's not really you actually want to turn the Dharma. You want to transform yourself with the Dharma. You don't want to develop more and more pride. That's actually against the Dharma. So he actually wakes up, and he actually asks about the Lotus Sutra teachings. And to me, actually, what was the most beautiful part about this teaching is at the very end, he says on 782, the bottom of the verse, he says, sheer, deep, and ox carts are just expedient devices to skillfully lay out beginning, midway, and end. Who could have imagined that within the burning house sat the Dharma king all along? Meaning that even within the house, they were actually all fine. But the Buddha is using expedient means upon expedient means to get them to wake up. You know, so it's interesting. He's able to actually see through that duality. So here, the sixth patriarch is essentially bringing that teaching forward, because it seems to me that this Chamberlain is very well versed in the Dharma. He knows all the terms. Probably read the Lotus Sutra. So he's saying, well, actually, what you're using as your way of explaining it is actually a limited way to understand the Dharma. But actually, in the ultimate teachings, affliction themselves are bodhi. They are non-dual, correlated. You know, there's no coming, there's no going. There's nothing to be attained. There's nothing you get. And maybe this is the final one. I would say there's another parable in the Lotus Sutra, which really, I would say, hammered that point in home for me when I read it. Was in the Lotus Sutra is actually where the Buddha, you could say, shares that, you know, actually my aspiration for all of you was that you would realize the vision and knowledge of the Buddhas. Not just to be free of suffering, not just to become an arhat or Parcheka Buddha, but actually full realization. And the arhats actually who were in attendance, it really just completely, you could say, literally say, blew their minds. They were like, whoa, this is way more than we expected. And 4 of the arhats actually described their experience with another parable. And for me, this is actually a really, because it's valuable for I think the reflection of Dharma is to kind of really kind of see the psychological moves that these parables or these stories are doing. And so they tell this story about being like a prodigal son. People have heard the prodigal son in the Christianity. Buddhism has a kind of a corollary prodigal son story. It's a little bit different than how it works in the Christian Bible. But essentially, there's a son who basically takes, you know, part of his inheritance and goes out into the world and squanders it. And in the process, he gets really beat up, you know, has nothing, and is just really, really poor. And over time, he even forgets where he came from. He's just miserable, you know, kind of good-for-nothing guy who's just kind of just wanting to make ends meet. Just I can get enough food for the day, I'll be okay. I just need to get enough food to get by, you know. And he comes by this house. It's not even just a house. It's like a mansion. It's like a compound. What's the word you use?
Estate.
An estate. You know, an estate. But it's actually his father's estate. He doesn't know that because he's completely, in his wanderings, got completely lost and is, you know, truly miserable. And he sees this estate and he's, oh, maybe I can find a place to work. But he looks at this in the estate and he sees the kind of the owner of the estate there being served by all these people. He gets really scared. He's, oh, I better get out of here because if maybe they'll think I'm here to steal something or do something. So he immediately starts running away. Now his father, who's the estate owner, looks out and he recognizes his son, who is just out there, poked his head in, and then starts to like leave very quickly. So he sends his 2 of his, you could say, let's say bodyguards, but we call it two of his servants, to go and to bring his son back, right? To bring the man back. But he didn't tell anyone. He's like, bring that man back. So these servants go out to get this man who's been wandering around, and as he's leaving, he's running away. These two servants come out for him. He's even more scared that he faints. He's just so frightened. He's like, oh my goodness, now I'm really in for it. They must have thought I did something wrong. Now I'm just really in big trouble. So he gets grabbing his pulled back in to see his father, and his father sees his son just fainted, and really miserable. And so once his son comes to, he says to his son, okay, no problem. Just go. You're nothing. I'm not holding you for anything. So the son says, oh, I'm so happy. I'm free. So he leaves. Okay, he gets out of the city. He finds this little town nearby. He can make a little bit of money just to get by. Okay, now the father though is thinking, okay, so what do I do? What do I do? My son, clearly, I try to bring him back, and it just frightens out of his wits. So what do I do? I mean, what would you do? All right, so he sends some more servants. He goes, actually, what you do, dress yourself in rag robes. Put some excrement on you, so you don't smell so good. And you go find him, and you talk to him and say, I know a place you can work that's pays good wages. It'll pay you double what you got now. We'll shovel dung, we do stuff, but you get more money than you have now. And so they go out and they talk to the son and said, yeah, here's this place to do. Oh, really? So he comes in and he starts working, basically shoveling dung. Every day shoveling dung. And his father's there, sitting, looking window, sees his son there, shoveling dung day in, day out. And he feels very pained in his heart. This is my son, which I want to give everything of my life to. But here he is, he can't even recognize his own inheritance. So he goes out there and does what? He goes, okay. He said, how about, he goes and he says, I see you working really hard. Actually, first he kind of dresses himself kind of like a worker too, like a work leader. And he goes, I see you working here hard all the time. You're really a good worker. I'm going to promote you. You can kind of lead the team. And bit by bit, he kind of promotes the son until the son is like the manager of the entire estate. He's kind of running everything. And then, so it's just at this point, right? He becomes very close to the estate owner. And then finally, pretty much at the very end, the estate owner tells him, actually, I think the estate owner is actually leaving. He's actually going to die. Is that right? He's going to die, right? No? People don't remember the story? I think he was actually about to leave. And he calls his son over and he says, actually, you're my son. Everything I have is already yours. And to me, that was such a beautiful psychological moment. What the Arhants are experiencing is that they worked really hard, they've cultivated the way, they've now are running the estate. They're doing pretty good. And all of a sudden the Buddha just tells them, actually, this is all yours from the beginning, and even more. And you can just feel the joy in their hearts. Wow, this was all mine from the beginning? It's just mind-blowing. How could that be possible? That's the Lotus Sutra spirit, and that's what these Arhats describe their state. And they actually later explain, actually the sweeping the dung was like sweeping away our afflictions, sweeping away our suffering, and that was the teachings that you gave us because that's all we could accept at the time because we couldn't even imagine that we had this potential. But now, you're taking us skillfully down this path, and now when you tell this to us, we can accept. And so they're just overjoyed. So that's that spirit for this piece. And so for me, that really captures the sense that all of a sudden we can actually see really in this spiritual path, we have to really work hard in transforming our afflictions. But in the ultimate sense of it, these afflictions and this bodhi, they're not, you can say they're non-dual. They're complementary. We're still stuck in a kind of duality, but actually, fundamentally, we're whole, complete, everything is fine. We're lacking nothing. They say we're lacking nothing. But the problem is we forget that. We don't even believe that can be possible. And so we have to go out and do stuff to make ourselves feel like we are actually productive or worthwhile or all the things that we do. And so the Buddha's teaching is basically step by step taking us back to where we're actually ready to let those things go. That's the process. Those are the expedient means that the Buddha sets up to bring us back. And the tricky thing also, we can't fall into the mode where we go, okay, I have all this inheritance, otherwise I don't do anything. The tricky thing about that is then we actually just attach to that idea, and that doesn't work either because, I think if we just imagine it, thinking that we don't have to do anything because we're quote-unquote awake already, doesn't actually cause our afflictions to disappear. We still get into our arguments, we still get into our fights, we still da-da-da-da-da-da. So a real good marker is, if this is actually true, is that actually we're free and easy and happy all the time, complete, no problems, everything is okay. We're not attached to our views. Our ability to respond to people is skillful and appropriate, moment to moment. We're not attached. There's a lot of markers to say, okay, so we're actually reached that point. So if we haven't reached the point, we have to actually use the Dharma tools expediently to help us let go. But that we don't want to attach to those Dharma tools as the final destination. Because there is no final destination. We're already there in a sense. The sutra saying we're actually there already. Okay, we didn't get to your question though at the very end with the master, what he left the master with. He said he got enlightened. Yeah, he got immediate and expansive awakening. So maybe Marty next week can answer that question. If you keep your question, and if Marty's not still manifesting illness next week, then you can ask him that question and see what his response is. That's a good question. And is there any questions? You usually go till 9 o'clock, right? So I don't know if there's any questions or things about the sutra or about things in general. I hope there was something useful in the reflections tonight. One of the monks told me in the Dharma, and this actually said Dharma listening is a skill. He says you don't actually have to listen and kind of get everything, but if you can just take one principle and use it, throughout your life, that's actually really good. If you just can listen and you heard a principle, oh, that actually made sense, and I can actually apply it and make it work in my life. That's real skill. So there's a skill to Dharma listening. It's not a casual thing. But otherwise, I don't know if there's any particular announcements. We have, today is Friday. We have our regular activities tomorrow. Dharma assembly starting at 9. And then we have a sutra lecture at night, 7:30. I think we'll do an Infinite Life Sutra. I think Jing Hersher and myself will be doing that tomorrow night. Sunday, we have one whole day of Amitabha Buddha recitation. I think Buddhism for the Modern Mind this Monday?
Yeah, Monday.
Yeah, this Monday, Doug Powers is going to be doing a class on Buddhism for the Modern Mind at 7:30 in the dining hall. Wednesday, Stephen Tainer has his class. Thursday, we have the East Bay Insight Meditation. And on Friday, we have this. And hopefully Marty will be here. Okay, so otherwise, we have, is there anything else that I'm missing? We're still doing the 10,000 Buddhas Repentance at CDTB. We'll have various activities during the summertime. If you're interested in Buddha Root Farm, you should probably sign up early so there's spaces. It's oregon.berkeleymonastery.org. And then there's also a Guanyin retreat you can get at drbux.org. So if you have any questions about that, you can ask myself or some of the others here in our community. Okay. So if there's nothing else, I actually didn't get to talk about illness too much. So we'll maybe see if there's any opportunities in the future. So we have our transference of merit. I don't know if somebody could get the sheets. It's in maybe Alan. I think I can finish by a dedication of merit. The spirit with a dedication of merit is to take you could say the goodness. We use the word merit, but merit in English doesn't quite translate because, the thing I usually think of like merit badges or something. It's not something we really think about. You could say it's kind of a goodness that comes from studying the Dharma, from doing good things, wholesome activities that lead out of suffering and bring happiness and joy to ourselves and others for the long term. And when we do those things, rather than just keeping it for ourselves, there's actually a practice of sharing that with other people. It's actually an activity we do with our mind. And something that's really helpful to do all the time. Because if we just hold it to ourselves, it's actually quite limited. It's described using what was Zejun's, is his name Zejun? The Chamberlain's analogy about lighting a lamp. But literally they say if we have the goodness, but if we transfer the merit, it's like lighting a lamp. And it can get, I think it actually even says it gets boundless. So it's taking that analogy. Okay, so if people have the verses, we can chant it and then bow to the Buddhas. May the merit from this practice adorn all the... Sorry. Is that the wrong one? Okay, wait. So, we do the other one. Sorry. We have many transferences. May every living being. That's right. May every living being. Okay, got it. Sorry. Take two. Okay. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Bow in respect to the three jewels.